Right guys, what's happening? I hope all is good. So we're going to record a little bit of a video today for the first installment of our kind of Wednesday video frequently asked questions. Okay, so what we're going to be talking about today is the idea of barbell exercises always being, or even just generally free weight exercises, always being inherently superior for hypertrophy. So, you know, we kind of take, or I'm going to say we as in, and I mean like the wider fitness industry, like we kind of just accept sometimes that, you know, free weight exercises are always better for hypertrophy. So when we say hypertrophy, we're talking about just building bigger muscles, okay? So we're not talking about performance and powerlifting or anything like that, okay? We're talking about building bigger muscles. So what we have to do is, first of all, I need you guys to kind of, you know, drop your biases like straight coming into this video, okay? Forget about the exercises that you prefer, that you like just have a bias towards, that you like doing, that you're good at. What we want to do is actually be kind of objective and examine this a little bit, because, you know, I posted this on Instagram and, you know, just asked if someone could give me a reason as to why barbell exercises were, you know, there was an independent reason why they were superior to machines, that you couldn't get the same from a machine that you can from a barbell free weight exercise. And, you know, I had one discussion with a guy back and forth for ages, and I think like the main outcome was that he didn't quite grasp where I was coming from with the discussion. So he kind of just referred to anecdotes and opinions, you know, saying like the classic point that people will come back to, and they'll say like, you know, oh, but all of the best bodybuilders ever have, you know, squatted and deadlifted and stuff, and it's like that is that's just not a relevant point. Like, that point does not fit into an objective discussion, because obviously all of the biggest guys in the world, most of them, are going to have done barbell exercises. Like, that's an obvious thing, because that is gym culture. Like, it is gym culture to go into a gym and to do a bench press and to do a back squat and to do a deadlift or some variations of those with a barbell. That is gym culture, bodybuilding culture, accepted, you know, practices, common practice. But what the militia is about, what we're about here, and you guys watching this video, it's about actually not just accepting common practice, but actually questioning it. And if it is completely true and that we should just accept it, then that's cool, we leave it there as it is. But if there are reasons that we can kind of pick those common, you know, accepted points apart and say, oh, that's not quite true, then we evolve and we improve our learning and we help with moving the industry forward. And that's what this is all about. It's about asking questions, about understanding why, and not just accepting things at face value, okay? And if you wanted to go with the anecdotal evidence as to why, you know, machines are also useful, you can look at people like Dorian Yates, who didn't do a back squat. He did, or any sort of barbell squat, he used to just do leg presses, you know, and he was 8-time Mr. Olympia, I believe. There's other people like Josh Maley, the current Mr. Universe. He just does hack squats and leg extensions. And I had some other examples as well. I can't really remember what I was going to say. Oh, Jordan Peterson. Or Jordan Peters, excuse me, not Jordan Peterson. Jordan Peters, he is, you know, one of the biggest monsters in the UK that you'll see at the moment, gained a ridiculous amount of muscle, and he, you know, just says that, oh, I got strong as, you know, he got strong as shit at the squat for years, and the thing that really changed his leg training was swapping to a hack squat. So all of these things are pieces of anecdotal evidence, but personally, I don't like fitting those things into these conversations, because that is not helpful. It is not helpful to just say, oh, look, this person does this and this person does this, because that's what people who don't have informed opinions do when they argue. What we want to do is be very objective, okay? So I want to touch on a couple of the main points that people tend to come back to when they're talking about why you should do a barbell exercise over a machine exercise. The first one is mechanical tension. And this is completely flawed, because mechanical tension is the tension that you get within the muscle fiber, between muscle proteins. So if we were to take the quadriceps muscle there at the front of the leg, we want to create tension between there and there, so between the origin and the insertion. We want to be able to create that tension between those muscle proteins, and that is not something that is completely dependent on you having a barbell. Like, people generally say this because they can lift more weight on a barbell than they can on maybe like the equivalent, like a hack squat or something like that. Let's just say that that's the example here. And people say that there's more mechanical tension because you can lift more weight. And what people kind of forget is that mechanical tension is not just a result of the weight on the bar. It is a result of the specific force on the muscle in question. Let's just say the quadriceps. It's probably the quadriceps in question here. So, for example, maybe you can lift more weight on a barbell back squat, but what if when you get to the bottom and you're coming down to the bottom of your squat and you press the floor at the bottom of your rep, that your hips shoot back just a touch. So that force that was initially coming from the quadriceps was actually kind of dissipated, like your hips just shot back as you extended the knee, and that force wasn't actually completely maximized on the quadriceps. So the tension from the weight wasn't specifically, maximized on the quadriceps throughout the rep, because you came up with a compensation. And this is one of the big limitations of barbell exercises, especially if you're not very skilled, is that there is a greater degree of instability. Okay, so because you are not in a fixed system, when you produce muscle force, it can be, dissipated elsewhere by another joint compensating or moving, as opposed to being pressed straight into the bar or into like the pads if you were using a hack squat. Whereas if you take the similar situation of the bottom of a hack squat and you press as hard as you can through the floor with your quads, as you shift that force now from the knee back to the hips actually can't go backwards because they're stabilized at the back by the pad. So what ends up happening is your sacrum drives into the pad, it creates more stability and maximizes the tension on the quadriceps, forcing you to have to work much, much harder. It's a very, very different ball game because there is that additional component of stability. So you don't have to work to create the same degree of stability at all of the other muscle groups, because you are fixed in a system where you can maximize the output of the muscles that you're trying to work. And that's kind of the next point, is people will say that because you have to use more stabilizer muscles, it leads to more hypertrophy. And it's like, by definition, that is kind of flawed, because if you have to use all your other muscle groups and all your other joints to create stability for the quadriceps to produce force, let's say, then that is directly saying that there are other links in the system that can break before your quadriceps. And this is something you'll see a lot on the barbell back squat. You'll find that your lower back, or your back in general, is what gives out before your quads actually do. Like, very few people fail on a squat because their legs genuinely couldn't push anymore. It's not because they couldn't push up and they just come to a stop and fall straight down. It's because they either cave forward, which is kind of the main thing. Like, they kind of cave forward, lose their balance, and as they produce force, they just kind of fall forward because they lost stability in the system. So that tells us that it's not actually the quadriceps that are always the limiting factor in a squat, especially when it comes to something like a regular barbell back squat where you don't have bands or whatever, and it's very difficult at the bottom. Then that's where you're going to kind of fail, because you kick your hips back too far because you lost stability in the system, your back gives out, and that's how you fail the squat. So that tells us the quadriceps weren't the direct limiting factor. Whereas something like a hack squat, if you were to come down to the bottom and press up, there's no room for your back to actually lean forward because you are fixed into the system. And because you're fixed, any point of failure is going to come from your legs no longer being able to produce the force to push the weight back up along the sled. Okay? And that's kind of the big thing that makes the difference between barbell and kind of machine alternatives, is that stability component. So, as we just discussed, that mechanical tension argument, it's completely flawed, because it assumes that we're talking about weight on the bar and that people can lift more weight and they have higher one rep maxes and stuff. And that's just not the case. It's the case that, like, mechanical tension is what we're actually looking at on the muscle in question. And you'll actually find that a lot of the time when you do machines, you feel your muscles work a lot more and you don't actually like it because you fail a lot earlier and you're like, oh Jesus. People always say this about the leg press, for example. They're like, oh, I only do my high reps on the leg press. And if you think about that and break it down a little bit, why you only do high reps on the leg press, it's because you haven't truly gained that bottom range control with very heavy loads. So you haven't gained that bottom range control. You're not used to actually producing maximum amount of force through your quads down there, because normally at the bottom of a squat people just kind of bounce out, or they find some kink in the system, like pushing the hips back and hinging it up with their back. So there's some things to consider. And also, kind of conversely, if we think about why people only do high reps on the leg press and not on the squat, it's because when you do high reps on the squat, there are other things like your respiratory system. You can get respiratory muscle fatigue. You can get, fatiguing of your bracing, fatiguing of your lower back. they're all the things that tend to fatigue on people when they do high reps in the squat. So if your lower back is the limiting factor to you performing the most amount of reps and getting the most out of the exercise, then by definition that may not be as effective an exercise for the muscle in question, i.e. the quadriceps. So those two things, like those 2 points, the stability and the mechanical tension, are the big things that make the difference between a lot of the very similar like alternatives. So, but like between a barbell exercise and a machine exercise. And the thing is, machines aren't all created equal, okay? And this is the problem. People will very often say that, you know, they'll compare like a leg extension and a back squat. And you can compare those things, but they are different exercises. Or they'll compare like a pec deck with a barbell bench press. And it's like, alright, you know, they train the same muscle groups, but they are different. What we should be comparing are things like a barbell bench press and something like a plate loaded chest press. Okay, they're the things that we should be comparing, much like the back squat and the hack squat. So if we think about something like a plate loaded chest press, right, you're still sitting down, your back is still against the bench. The only difference is that the path that the weights are going to move is dictated for you. And what you have to ask yourself is there really that much of a difference in hypertrophy potential by needing to stabilize the bar and push it directly up towards the ceiling? Like, is that something that contributes massively to hypertrophy, the need to actually stabilize the bar? And like that's not something that comes into the mechanical tension point on the muscle in question. So if we're talking about the pecs and you're saying, oh, but you need more rotator cuff activation or whatever, like you need to create more stability within the shoulder in the rotator cuff to stabilize the bar when you're pressing up, if that's the argument, that you need more, your stabilizer muscles are working harder, then again, by definition, you are saying that there's other limiting factors to the exercise other than the pec muscles that we're trying to target. So what you'll find is that a lot of the arguments to say that barbell exercise is actually superior to machine exercises or machine alternatives actually kind of contradict themselves, and they're actually the points that make machines somewhat favorable. So they're kind of all the big points, and there's probably a lot there for you guys to think about. And you're probably thinking, you know, about all these different exercises, and I want to give you some examples just so we can kind of, you know, give you guys some take-home points. And if we think about back is the big one. So if we think about training the lats, okay, people will have always said that, you know, oh, the barbell row is the king of lat exercises and all this, and it's like, is it really though? Like, when you're doing a barbell row, like, how many of you have felt that your lower back is what gets fatigued? So like that happens quite a bit. Or you find yourself jerking, or you find your body moving and your hips kind of moving a little bit, so you're not completely stable. And you probably don't feel your lats work quite as well as when you do something like a chest supported row, so where your chest is supported and you're rowing like that. And the thing is there is, when your chest is supported, you can create greater stability, you're braced down so that all of the force that you produce is directed onto the lats, okay, so it's coming from the lats and it's not being dissipated elsewhere, so you're not actually wasting energy. And by minimizing those energy leaks, we maximize our force production and hence maximize the work that the muscle in question has to do. And you know, it just goes on and on. Like if you think about a dumbbell preacher curl where your elbows supported, your shoulders locked down, you produce a lot more direct bicep force there versus something like a dumbbell curl where you're unsupported. And you guys will feel that. You'll feel a much harder contraction. Okay? And these are just all the kind of things that you have to think about, because we just kind of accept a lot of things as being better. Like we just think that, oh, the back squat is obviously the king of leg exercises, and it's like, meh, not necessarily. Okay? And the most of the things we've talked about is stability. Okay? And like there is the whole resistance profile thing. We can bring in, you know, whether or not the resistance changes appropriately throughout the range to make the exercise favorable. But, you know, I think that kind of is, again, it kind of changes the points that we're talking about, because what that does is it kind of biases. It shows that I have a bias towards machines, because that's an obvious one that can be very different, because not all machines have a better resistance profile than barbell exercises, and some machines have the exact same resistance profile. But if you can find effective machines with a better resistance profile than barbell exercises, then they are undoubtedly superior when combined with the superior stability. So, you know, they're the things that we're talking about, and we will talk about resistance profiles again in another video, because I want to do a video about how to effectively use bands as accommodating resistance and stuff like that. So that's definitely something we'll be coming to. But the main purpose of this discussion was to kind of tease apart some of those arguments as to why barbell exercises are inherently superior, because I just don't believe that they are. And not that I don't believe, like, I'm not talking about my beliefs, I'm talking about objective things here. Like, we've done the comparisons, we've broken it down, like what are the contributing factors to hypertrophy, and you can clearly see that machines do actually have some advantages. But this is where we want to talk about the practical stuff, okay? I'm not necessarily saying that you should go and ditch all your barbell exercises. I use a lot of barbell exercises in my training. Okay, it is far more practical and accessible for you to have barbell exercises in your training. Okay, like any gym you go into, they're going to have barbells, so there is that, you know, ability for you to just go to any gym if you're traveling or whatever, and you don't have to be worrying about having the same machine. Whereas pretty much every machine is somewhat different, so it's harder to track your progress. Okay, and it's not as easy to develop skill over time if you're constantly changing gym or you're constantly changing the machine that you're using. But that is something for you guys to take into consideration from a practical perspective, to say that, okay, maybe some machines are superior in some cases than barbell exercises, but that doesn't mean I should change my training based on that, because I have to consider more than just the optimal stability or whatever. Because what you also have to consider is what you actually enjoy. Whatever you can adhere to in the long term is what's actually important. And also that STARS checklist. So if you guys watch the presentation or the keynote from the Creator Agency Summit, you'll know the STARS checklist. I'll put it up on the screen anyway, but STARS checklist is specificity, so that the exercise is very specific to the muscle that we're trying to train. And you know, for some of you, that may be the case with your barbell exercises and your free weights, that you're able to be very specific with the muscle you're trying to target. But for some of you, you'll find that you do better with machines. Then when it comes to the T of STARS, we're talking about time. So is it timely? You know, so if there is a machine that is always taken at the gym, for example, or maybe there's a barbell that's always taken at the gym, like what is more timely for you to perform? Or if you only have a leg extension in your gym and that's the only alternative leg machine to a back squat, then if you're also trying to get, you know, glute development, some adductor development, some lower back development out of your back squat, then it wouldn't be a timely decision to say I'm going to do a leg extension and then train all these muscle groups separately versus doing them all together if you are short for time. But again, that's a question that is very individual. Like what sort of time do you have, and is there a time difference between you accessing one piece of equipment and the other, or setting it up or whatever. Then there's accessibility. Obviously most of you people have access to barbells. Most of you maybe won't have the best machines in the world. We don't all train at M10 or MI40, so you mightn't have the best machines. And this is one of the things about Ireland, is that most gyms don't have the ideal machines that would make for perfect alternatives. But like if you go to the UK, a lot of gyms do. Then when we go to the R, it's resistance, and that's that resistance profile thing, which we're going to do a separate video on to try and tease that out a little bit more and show you how you can optimize that. And then the final S is stability. Okay, so how stable you are so that you can optimize the force that you're producing. So again, that's kind of the last question that we already discussed. So that STARS checklist, along with what you actually enjoy, is what you should be using to make effective decisions. So what I don't want you guys to go away from this video with is me saying that you should swap all your barbell exercises for machines. Because you know, the majority of my clients, their main exercises are barbell based. Because you know, people enjoy getting stronger on the squat. People enjoy getting stronger on deadlift variations. People enjoy the bench press and bench press variations. And that's okay. And it's mainly what is accessible for the majority of my clients who don't train in these kind of big, like, epic gyms that you'll see in the UK and that you'll see in the US. And this is really what we have to keep in mind, is that it's about more than just optimal. But what we want for you guys is to have an open mind, because I don't have a bias towards machines. Like, I don't really care what the best exercise is. I just care about knowing, like being able to tease them all apart and understanding, alright, what is best in different situations, so that I can help my clients and help you guys. Like, that's what's actually important. So we want you guys to be the people in the fitness industry that question things, that ask why, that are curious, and that are able to, you know, take these statements that people make and say, well, I'm not sure about that because, and then ask the question that you need to ask. Because that's how you actually learn. You don't learn by just accepting things at face value. And anytime I hear something that is in any way black and white, I always like to take a step back and say, okay, like, let me think about the reasons that you are saying this. or get the person to explain it, and then see how that fits in with your current thought process, see if you can find holes in it, and then go and try find true answers. Because true understanding does not come by accepting something that someone else has said. It comes with understanding what that person is saying and then being able to fit that into your current level of knowledge and then filling in the gaps. Okay, so that's what this is all about. And if you guys disagree with me and if there's any points that weren't clear, just drop them in the comments. That's completely cool. But hopefully that made some sense, got you thinking, and that you've got some things in your head. Maybe you're thinking that, oh, maybe I don't need to do barbell rows, maybe they're not the best exercise in the world. Like maybe I don't necessarily need to do a back squat because I've got this hack squat in my gym that I really like and it just feels good, and for some reason I just thought you have to use barbells. Or maybe it's the same situation with the chest press, or whatever it is, you know. So guys, thank you very much for watching. I hope you're all having a great week, and yeah, drop any comments that you have down below in the comments.